Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showcasing two different techniques of ink blending using Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks to make beautiful skies for the backgrounds of your cards. In order to do that, I'm using Fawn's new Yeti or Not stamp set. This was part of their latest Christmas 2019 release, and I just thought that these Yetis are super cute. One of the cards is actually going to be a slider card with the Yeti snowboarding down the hill. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to start by ink blending both backgrounds, and for this technique I'm using some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock, which is I think mostly meant for watercoloring, but also works really well for ink blending because the paper holds onto the ink really nicely and absorbs it so that the ink just sort of sinks into the paper and blends really well. The first technique I'm showing is using these foam applicators that are actually sold by Tim Holtz as well to kind of go along with the Distress Oxide inks. So what you do is you take a foam applicator and put it onto those handles, and it just sticks right on with Velcro. And then you can dab that into the ink and put it onto your paper. For the first card, I'm using this circular technique to make it look like the lighter area is in the middle and it's sort of emanating out through the sky in a circular way. The lightest color I used was Twisted Citron, and now I'm moving on to Evergreen Bow, which is a little bit darker. And I'm going to speed up the video here so that you can see the final product without having to wait for all the ink blending to happen. Essentially, the technique that I like to use with these applicators is to just kind of go back and forth and back and forth. So start with the lightest, go to the medium, then go back to the lightest until you're happy with the blend, then add the dark, and then again go back and forth between the medium and the dark. And with these foam applicators, you get a really heavy application of ink, so you can get some really deep, striking colors. So once I've done that, you get the effect shown here. The next technique I'm showcasing is using these lighter colors for a more muted sky. And in order to do that, I'm using these Picket Studios Life-Changing Blender brushes. These brushes have the consistency almost of a makeup brush that you would use to put foundation on your face or something. They have all these beautifully fine pieces of hair on them that really soak up the ink. What's really noteworthy about this different type of applicator though is that it's a little bit more light on the ink application. So you can see I'm going back and forth with the ink a lot, but the color that you get is not super dense. It kind of adds a light sheen of the color onto the paper. Again, I'm going to speed up the video so you can see the ink blending come together. So I really like this technique for a lighter application of color when you want the colors to be a little bit more muted and not as in your face. So that's sort of the main difference between these two ink blending techniques, where the foam applicators give you a really strong, dense application of color, where these brushes give you a little bit of a lighter touch. So here you can see the comparison of the two different types of applications. With the purples and the blending brushes, you get a nice light application of ink, although they still blend very nicely. With the foam applicators, you get really strong color, and again, a really nice blend. So these are both really good methods. They're just a little bit different, and you can decide which one you think is best for your project. Before I finish with these backgrounds, I just wanted to add a nice splash of sparkle. So I'm using this sheer Shimmer Spritz. This is a nice sheer sparkle that comes already mixed into a liquid in a spray bottle. So all you have to do is shake it up to make sure that all the glitter is mixed in because it does settle over time, and then just spray it onto your project. You'll see that because the Distress Oxide is reactive to water, even adding this small amount of liquid does create a bit of a speckled effect. So I'm just dabbing that off with paper towel. And then I went ahead and did that for both the backgrounds to get the same effect for both. Off camera, I stamped a whole bunch of images from Fawn's Yeti or Not stamp set, as well as a couple extras from other stamp sets. You can see the squirrels there are from Fawn's Pick of the Patch stamp set. The penguin is from the Toboggan Together stamp set, which they released a few Christmases ago. And then I believe one of the Christmas ornaments is from the Joy to the Woods stamp set, which again is a bit of an older set. I'm speeding up the coloring process here so that you can see the whole thing come together quickly, but feel free to skip ahead in the video if watching coloring is not your thing. If you want to see more coloring in other videos, click on that link in the top right corner of your screen, and that should take you straight to another video. I'm using a mixture of really Christmassy themed colors here. I figured since the backgrounds that I had ink blended were sort of more non-traditional Christmas colors with the purple and the blue, that the other elements that I color for the card could be sort of more traditional Christmas colors, and these wouldn't really go overboard then. My typical coloring technique is basically to start with the darkest color, then blend it out a little bit with the medium, and then finish it off with the light. I then like to go back in with the dark color to really enhance the shadows, and I feel like that adds a nice effect. I used to be really scared of doing this actually. When I first started coloring with Copics, I had it in my head that I just needed to blend everything out as much as possible. So I would put the dark color, but then I would immediately blend it and blend it and blend it until you could barely even see it anymore, and everything sort of just became very monotone. So as I've colored more and I've sort of figured out how these markers work a little bit more and what looks good, I've started to go back in with the dark color at the end. And I've realized that it's okay if it's not perfectly blended. It's okay to have those shadow lines there. They actually do add a nice dimension. For the Yetis, the coloring was super simple. All I had to do was take a warm gray marker and just color around the edges, and that gives them a little bit of dimension but still leaves them looking white. And then of course, I did color in their faces with a little bit of a darker warm gray marker. Something you'll also notice if you do get through the rest of this video is that a lot of these images didn't end up actually being used on the card, and I do tend to do this a lot. When I'm in the stamping stage, I tend to want to just stamp out all the images that I could possibly need and color them all in and then just have them ready to go so that I don't find myself needing any extras at the end. I like coloring anyway, so for me it's fun to have all these images to color and to spend the time coloring them. And then any images that I don't use, I always keep them. So I actually did make a card the other day, which I've posted over on my Instagram channel, which basically just used all the scraps from other cards that I had left over. I had sort of been in a summer card making mode for a while, so I had a lot of leftover fishes and palm trees and beach umbrellas and beach balls, so I just arranged them all into sort of a circle and called it a card. If you're interested, the link to my Instagram profile is in the description below, so you are welcome to go check it out if you want to see more of my cards. So that is all the coloring of the stamped images, and now it's time to build the cards. I'm starting with this purple background, and for this one, I envisioned just having the Yetis standing in the middle of the card and a nice sparkly hill that's supposed to look like snow beneath them. So to make that hill, I just used a hillside border die from Fawn and cut it out with my die cutting machine. I then decided that the background needed a little bit more extra detail, so I used my white gel pen, as well as a sparkly gel pen, to go in and add little dots that are meant to look like snow falling in the air. That white pen that I'm using there is the Sakura de Crest pen. It's really nice and really jelly. And then the sparkly pen is just a Sakura Jelly Roll pen. So this is how it turned out. You can see the nice purple ink blending, and then the splatter of the sparkle, and also the added touch of the white and sparkly gel pens. For the sentiment, I decided that I wanted to use the simple wavy banner die from Fawn, and I cut it out of a piece of gray cardstock. I'm actually planning to white heat emboss the sentiment onto it, and I use a specific technique for stamping onto these simple wavy banners that I thought I would showcase. Because the simple wavy banner isn't a rectangular shape, it doesn't fit nicely into the corner of the MISTI stamping tool, so I just put it into the middle and anchor it with 2 magnets. I make sure to put my clear grid paper on top, and this gives the stamp something to stick onto, which you'll see in a moment. So when you're placing your sentiment stamp into your MISTI, you can place it right onto this plastic grid and then adjust it, and it'll actually stick to the plastic, and you can make it form a wavy shape to sort of match that banner die that's underneath it. So that's what I'm doing now, where you can see I'm sort of playing with the ends and getting them to appear a little bit more wavy so they follow the shape of that die. You can then pull the stamp up with the left side of the MISTI. Now you want your simple wavy banner die to stay in place so that your stamped image stamps in place. To do that, you just pull up one side of the plastic first and put the magnet underneath. Then you pull up the other side of the plastic and put the magnet underneath that side, and this way the banner die stays in place. So I stamped that with Versamark ink, and now I'm going to be using Hero Art's white embossing powder to emboss. I'm just using a coffee filter here to catch all the extra embossing powder, and you just pour it right on, and then I just sort of flick the other side to get the excess off. You'll see that there are still a little extra pieces of embossing powder on the stamped side, but that's totally fine. I just use my fingernail here to get rid of them, but you could also use a paintbrush or any other small tool that you have. I'm then holding onto one side of the banner with my tweezers to avoid getting the heat onto my hand, and then using my heat tool to melt the embossing powder, so you can see that it's all melted and ready to go. I then assembled some other pieces for the card. I used a piece of pattern paper from the Fawn Perfectly Plaid Chill Pack, which is that green piece you see there, and I'm going to use liquid glue to adhere it to the card. This took me a bunch of tries to get it straight, but the good thing about liquid glue is that it's movable. So if you don't get it right the first time, you can just wiggle it around until it's perfect. I then applied the same treatment to this front panel, and again use liquid glue to stick it onto the front of the card. So you have the 3 layers shown there. Next, I'm sticking the snowy hill onto the card as well. This time I'm using foam squares to prop it up, so it has a nice added bit of dimension. So I'm lining it up to make sure that it really lines up with the purple piece behind that's supposed to be the sky. And then I'll just stick it down. I'm going to use the same technique to adhere all of the little bits to the card. Any piece of the image that sticks off of that hill and into the sky, I'm putting foam squares on so that they're also propped up. But any piece of the image that sticks onto the hill, I'm putting tape. I'm using tape instead of liquid glue here because I find that liquid glue doesn't really adhere to glitter paper very well. I find that tape works a lot better and really sticks to the glitter nicely. I use some nice thin double-sided tape and just cut it down to the sizes that I need before I adhere it to the card. Then it's time to add the sentiment. So I'm just sort of testing out where I think it would look good here, and in the end I decide that I want to put it in the sky just above the Yetis. At the end of the day, I noticed that I had put the Yetis on slightly off-center, and it bothered me so much that I filled in the rest of the scene using some trees, so you don't even notice that the Yetis are a little bit off-center because the whole scene is filled in anyways. So there you have the finished card. Off camera, I also added in a few little drops using Tonic Nouveau Jewel Drops in white to make some little elevated pieces of snow. Now I'm going to show how the next card came together. This is the slider card with that blue blended background. For this card, I'm using a white card base along with a border cut from Fawn Nitpicky pattern paper, which was a set that they released either last year or the year before. And then on top of that, I'm placing my blended background. I then decided that I wanted 2 layers of hills, one with silver glitter paper and one with white, just to add a bit of colorful interest. And I'm going to be cutting the slider into the white piece. So I'm using these 2 border dies to cut them out, and I'm going to run them through my die cutting machine off camera. These are both Fawn dies. So there you have the 2 hill pieces cut out and laid onto the blended background. And you can see how they come together to make this nice 3-dimensional looking scene. I'm now going to build the slider mechanism. I'm using a dime here. Fun fact, in Canada we don't have pennies anymore. They took them completely out of circulation. So I'm always using dimes in my slider, which is totally fine. They're just about the same size and work the same way. To build the slider, I'm going to add 3D fun foam strips along the outside of the slider channel. I had to cut down a very thin piece of the foam to go along that top edge because it's a very thin section and you still need space for the dime to move. So I'm just using some double-sided tape to stick on that nice thin piece of foam. And I'm going to do the same thing all the way around the edge to make sure that the dime has space to move, but also that the hill is supported with an even layer of foam. So all the way around, I'm just adding some tape, and then on top of that, I'll add the foam, and along the way, I like to just make sure that the dime can still move. I noticed that there was some tape hanging out beneath the foam, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't causing the dime to stick. So I tried to take an eraser and erase it a bit away, but that didn't really do very much. So I think it'll be fine. So once all the tape is on, I then added tape to this side of the foam and placed it nicely on my card. I made sure to put that dime in there first so that it's already inside. That is a mistake I've made before, and if you forget this, it's fine. You can sort of jimmy the dime in through the slider channel. It just makes your card a little bit bent in places. Again, it's totally fine, but if you can remember, it's good to put it down there first. So I'm just making sure that this hillside lines up nicely, and then I'm sticking it down. And you can see here now that the dime moves nicely back and forth in the card in that slider channel, so that's great. So now it's time to add the dimensional element to the dime so that it sticks up and keeps the dime in the slider channel and allows the Yeti to adhere to it. For this, I'm using these My Favorite Things slider channel elements, which are a super cheap little pack that you can buy. I think I got them at Simon's Just Stamp, but you can buy them at My Favorite Things too. And I'm just using some double-sided tape here to adhere that little piece to the dime. So I'm putting the tape onto the little slider element first, and then sticking that right on the dime. I will admit I really struggled here to put that piece in a place that allowed the dime to fully move in the slider channel. I cut it out of the video because it took a lot of finessing, but essentially all that I had to do was find the spot on the dime that allowed that slider mechanism to move without causing it to get stuck. So if this happens to you and you find that your slider is just getting stuck along the way, you might just have to keep playing around until you find that exact position that you can put that little dimensional element on to allow the dime to slide properly. So once I had it in a good spot, I then put some more tape on it and stuck my Yeti on. And this allows the Yeti to stick onto that three-dimensional piece and slide along with the dime in the slider channel. So there you can see the Yeti snowboarding along the hill. I then went ahead and glued some of the other little elements together, like the hat onto the Yeti. And now I'm going ahead and adhering all of these elements to the card. Just like the other card, I'm using a mixture of tape and glue. So if the image is being glued onto the glitter, I'm using tape because that sticks onto the glitter better. But if the element is being glued onto the sky, then I can use a bit of glue. I tend to prefer glue just because it's a little bit more movable, so when I can use it, I will. So for each element, I'm just doing the same thing and sticking them onto the card until the scene is built. Okay, so now all of the elements have been adhered to the card, and the scene is done. The last thing is to put the sentiment on. I used the same technique for this sentiment that I did for the first card, where I took a gray piece of cardstock and white heat embossed the sentiment. This time it's Yeti Set Go for that cute snowboarding Yeti. I then cut half of the banner off to make it seem as though it's sort of coming in from the edge of the card, and this way it takes up a little bit of less space on the card as well. So now all of the elements and the sentiment are put into place and that Yeti can slide nicely. To finish off this card, I'm just adding one extra little touch of some glossy accents to make some of the elements pop a little bit more. So I'm adding it onto a couple of those little ornaments, and then I'll put it onto the Yeti's goggles as well as the star above the tree. This just gives them a nice three-dimensional effect along with some really pretty shine. So that's this card all done. As you can see, the Yeti slides nicely in his little channel, and I really like how the other elements came together with the little squirrels to create this really cute scene. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed learning about different methods of blending Distress Oxide inks to create pretty skies. If you're interested in seeing more of my card making videos, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. This way you'll get notified whenever I release a new video, which I do every week. You can also go check out my Instagram profile, which is linked in the video description below. That's another showcase for all of the cards that I'm making. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!